UFC Vegas 61 betting and DraftKings show. We have 13 fights this Saturday. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the bantamweight division as Randy Costa, the Zohan, comes in as a -300 favorite. The comeback on Guido Canetti is +240. And this one's a banger right from the jump. I think Randy Costa, we know what he's going to bring to the table. This guy's a 6-3 prospect. All 6 wins have come by knockout inside the first round. All 3 of his losses, he was forced to go into the second round, and he was finished in all 3 of those fights. So the cardio dump is very for real for this kid, but he's also very, very dangerous in the first couple minutes of the fight, and you can't really understate that because he's going to move forward, he's going to throw in volume, he has that unorthodox striking style, and he's going to land heavy punches here against Guido Canetti, who's a 43-year-old fighter. He's getting up there in age. The durability is really starting to come into question. Been finished in 2 of his last 3 losses, and I just think Costa's going to be able to get a war out of Canetti. Canetti's very explosive himself early in fights, and he's really a willing dance partner. So I think these guys are going to meet in the middle. I think they're going to go to war, and I think Costa is going to be the one that comes out on top in those exchanges. So give me Costa by first round knockout. That's the official pick, and he's a strong high upside play on DraftKings this week. Next fight up, we have Jalija Stoliarenko coming in as the slightest favorite at -115 with newcomer Chelsea Chandler on the comeback at -105. And this one's an interesting matchup because on one hand, we have Stoliarenko, who's historically known as a first round submission or bust style fighter. She's coming off a first round submission win over Jessica Rose Clark with her signature armbar submission. That is her best asset. 9 wins, all by armbar, all in the first round. So it's clear that that is her move, and she's very good at going for it. And then on the Chandler side, she previously fought in Invicta. She's a 4-1 prospect. She's very powerful, fights out of the southpaw stance, very big for the division, likes to clinch up against the cage, really unleash some powerful combinations. But outside of her brute strength, there really isn't much substance to her game. She's really elementary in terms of the ground game. I think Stoliarenko is going to have a clear grappling edge if she can force the grappling exchanges, and I think eventually she does. This is a close fight because on one hand, Chandler is going to have the striking advantage, and Stoliarenko is very hittable on the feet, but she's also very durable. We've seen her take a ton of damage across the regional scene, and I do expect her to at some point get this fight to the mat where I do think she has a clear edge and she will have an advantage to go for that armbar, her favorite move. So we're going to say Stoliarenko by submission is the official pick. It's not a bad fight to target on DraftKings because for starters, women fights typically go lower owned than they should, and we have a women's main event. So it's going to be interesting to see where ownership shakes out. I'll have that on my website, fightnumbers.com, later in the week. But in terms of this fight, I think there's upside on both sides, and I'm actually semi-interested in the under 2.5 at plus money just because I think Stoliarenko has submission upside and Chandler probably has a little bit of knockout upside as well. But we're going with Stoliarenko. Next up in the light heavyweight division, Maxine Grishen comes in as a -175 favorite with Felipe Lins on the comeback at +150. And this one's an easy pass for me, really on all aspects. For starters, Maxine Grishen has never been a guy that I've been super high on since coming over from PFL. I think on paper, he had a really strong record, but maybe if he came over to the UFC a couple years earlier, then I think I would have, gave him a little bit more respect. In terms of his skill set, I think he's fine. Like, he's a technical striker. The issues I have with him is I think he's limited in terms of his round winning ability. He doesn't put a ton of volume out there, has a little bit of power, but he doesn't have like that one punch power, and he's not really an aggressive finisher either. And then he never really looks to grapple. So it's like, how are you really convincingly winning rounds in a lot of those fights, especially as a pretty sizable favorite? It's just concerning to me. And if you guys have listened to me for some time, I'm usually not trying to back those fighters, those low volume strikers that don't ever really land takedowns or grapple. It's like their round winning ability, I think, is pretty limited. And then on the Lin side, he's also been a guy that I haven't been impressed with since coming over from PFL. He's the former heavyweight champion over in PFL, and he really just hasn't looked that part since coming over to the UFC, right? Like, he hasn't looked really powerful at all. It seems like he has pillow hands. He's been knocked out. The durability is definitely in question. The one thing I'll say, it was encouraging to see him finally go to the wrestling. Landed 4 takedowns in his last fight. Does hold a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'd expect him to have the grappling advantage if he were to go to it. But again, this is an easy pass for me. I think Grishen probably keeps the fight standing for the most part, wins a boring decision where not much happens on both sides, but I just don't really see a ceiling either way. I think it's an easy pass from a betting perspective. Which brings us to our next fight in the middleweight division. I have Krzysztof Jotko comes in as a small favorite at -120. Brendan All-In Allen on the comeback at +100. And speaking of guys that are low volume, don't really aggressively grapple, and are just guys that I don't really ever want to back, Krzysztof Jotko fits that bill for me. I've never really been a Jotko guy. Listen, the skill set is there. I'm not denying that. The guy's a technical striker, solid, well-rounded skill set, decent grappler. But again, doesn't put a ton of output out there, doesn't deal well with being pressured, doesn't really have a ton of power. This guy's a split decision machine. He's been to decision a handful of times in the UFC. He seems like he's always going to a split a lot of times because he just doesn't convincingly win rounds. And again, going back to the Grisham conversation, these are fighters that I just don't really ever want to back at any sort of juice. And I think that fits the mold here. Even though I think he's a better technical striker than Brendan Allen, I still have some concerns because Allen is going to be moving forward. He's going to do his typical pressuring. He's going to land in volume, going to be throwing a lot more volume than Jotko. So while I expect Allen to eat some shots here, Allen is very hittable on the feet. It's like if Allen eats a jab or two, but then lands 3 or 4 sloppy hook shots and he swings with power, how are the judges really scoring that? Because if Allen's the one pressuring and maybe lands a couple more punches in those exchanges, I would think that they would side with Allen on that. And then in terms of the grappling, I actually think Brendan Allen is a more dangerous submission grappler. Jotko is probably more positionally sound on the mat, and I would expect if there is grappling here, Jotko could potentially spend more time in dominant position, but I think Allen would be more live for a finish on the mat. So it's just a spot where I'm leaning towards the underdog. It's not like a home run pick by any stretch because Allen does have his holes as well. But I do think Allen's a live dog here, should be able to land more volume on the feet. Jotko, just one of those guys, he's probably going to land anywhere from 50 to 60 significant strikes, maybe lands a takedown. He's not really doing much. So it's like, yeah, he might be able to win a close decision here. Do I want to back that at any type of juice? I personally don't. I have more interest in Allen on DraftKings, but there's another fight where I kind of just think it's low scoring. I don't really see either guy hitting a ceiling in this fight because while I talked a lot of smack about Jotko there, he's actually very good at limiting the upside of his opponents. And if Allen isn't going to be able to find that finish on the mat, which I don't think he does in this fight at a very high clip, it's like, we're basically just going off of significant strikes if a finish doesn't materialize, and that's not going to do it even in the mid-range here. Which brings us to our next bout as Cream Silva comes in as a -145 favorite. The comeback on Jesse the Body Snatcher Ronson is +125, and this is a fight where I think both guys are super untrustworthy. For starters, Silva came off an extended layoff in his last fight. I did have some questions with him there against Ricky Glenn. We didn't get to see much of that fight because he basically just got starched inside the first round, and that is the main concern with him is he's been knocked out multiple times. I think he is a little bit chinny, but he does have power. This guy is very explosive on the feet. I think he's got a pretty decent skill set, and I'm willing to back him as the younger fighter, the more explosive fighter with more power against a guy like Jesse Ronson, who basically outside of the upset, which was later overturned against Nicholas Dalby, who's not somebody that I rate very highly to begin with, but outside of that upset victory, this guy really hasn't shown us much of anything in either of his UFC runs. Like, I don't rate this guy very highly at all. He's nearly 37 years old now, which is another red flag for me. We got a lot of older fighters on this card, and he's not one that I'm willing to back with my money. So even though there's questions on both sides, I don't trust the durability really with either guy. I'm going to go with Silva. I think he has more finishing potential. In terms of DraftKings, I do think you could target both sides of this one just because there are a lot of question marks, and I think this one probably has a wide range of outcomes of how it could go in terms of DraftKings scoring, but I'm definitely going to have a moderate lean towards the Silva side. Next fight up, we got my girl. It's Baby Shark season. She comes in as a minus 210 favorite. The comeback on Jessica Penne is plus 180, and this one I don't have to spend a lot of time on because at 40 years old, or nearly 40 years old, Jessica Penne does not present a ton of problems. You know, she's more of a grappler, but doesn't have strong wrestling, only averages just over 1 takedown per 15 minutes, only defends takedowns at 40% in the UFC, and I think that's key in this matchup against Tabatha Ricci, who's relied on her solid takedowns and well-rounded grappling game to win her last couple fights. So I think Tabatha Ricci gets the job done here. I even think Ricci might be a better striker, and I don't think she's a good striker by any stretch, but I expect her to close distance here, to be landing volume on the feet, and then go to her powerful takedowns where I think she'll get little resistance. The only real concern here I have is that Penne is going to be the bigger fighter. Maybe she can reverse or sweep Ricci and maybe be able to bank some control time herself, but I think over the majority of the 15 minutes, and I do expect this one to go the full 15, I think Tabatha Ricci banks probably half the fight in dominant position. I think she clearly wins at least a 29-28. So Ricci by decision is the official pick. Don't have a ton of love for this fight in terms of DraftKings because I don't really see a ceiling performance on either side. Next up in the heavyweight division, Elar Latifi comes in as a minus 175 favorite with Alexei Oleinik on the comeback at plus 150. And I don't really have a ton of interest here, but I'm not going to fade this fight entirely on DraftKings because I do think there is some finishing potential on both sides. Elar Latifi, while he's super low volume, you know, since moving up to the heavyweight division, he's had 2 fights that went the full 15 minutes. He landed 5 significant strikes in one and 10 significant strikes in the other. And I'll just quick do a plug on Prize Picks because I do expect this line to move. They priced his significant strikes, I think, at 29.5, which is absolutely absurd. Like I said, he's landed 15 combined in 2 fights that went the full 15 minutes since moving up to heavyweight. He's never been a high volume guy to begin with. And then you factor in the finishing potential as well. Alexei Oleinik has been knocked out multiple times. This dude's 45 years old, can't really take the damage anymore, but he's always going to be dangerous when the fight goes to the mat. He showed that in the last fight against Jared Vanderaa, who was basically putting it on him and then goes to the grappling for whatever reason, ends up getting caught in a choke and getting submitted there. So Oleinik's a guy that you just can never count out. Despite really questioning the durability, the explosiveness is completely gone at this stage in his career. The takedowns aren't even really there anymore. He's pulling guard. All that stuff is not good. But if you're going to go to the ground with him, he is a live underdog. And that's what's concerning seeing Latifi as a big favorite here, is because he's probably going to go to the ground with him. That's what he's been doing his last couple fights. He's looking to land takedowns, and really he's just a lay and pray artist. He's not really looking to do damage, not looking to finish you on the mat, just looking to lay on you, stall it out, and grind his 15-minute decision victory. Is Oleinik going to let him do that? I don't know, but I just have some concerns there. I know he probably should be able to stay safe here in top position, but I'm just saying minus 175 is a lot of juice to pay, especially factoring in he's gonna probably take the fight to where Oleinik wants it to be. So there is some concerns there. I think Oleinik is probably a live underdog because he's always live for that submission, but Latifi also has the potential to knock him out if he actually does let his hands go. And I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. So again, the Prize Picks play, I like under 29.5 significant strikes. In terms of DraftKings, I'm going to have exposure to both sides. I think Latifi probably lays and prays to a decision, but my DraftKings lineups are probably going to be more geared towards the finishing potential of Alexei Oleinik. Next up in the lightweight division, Mike Davis makes his return to the octagon as a minus 180 favorite. Originally supposed to fight Uros Medic in this spot. Medic had to pull out of this fight due to injury. Slava Claus is stepping in on short notice. He's on the comeback at plus 155. This one should be a banger as well, though. Mike Davis is a guy who I've always thought had a pretty decent skill set. He's a high volume striker on the feet, does have knockout power, but he's also shown the ability to land takedowns as well. He's landed multiple takedowns across a couple of his UFC fights already. I think he can go to the takedowns here against Slava Claus, who we know his best skill set, he comes from the high level striking background. He's a great counter striker, doesn't put a ton of of volume out there, but makes his punches count. The way you beat this guy, we just saw it in his last fight against Mark Diakiese. You take this guy down. Yes, he's probably going to work back up, and then you take him down again. He was taken down 11 times in that fight. I think Davis could land multiple takedowns here, and I expect Davis to be competitive in the striking as well. I think both guys could have some success there, where I expect Davis to be landing a little bit more volume and then have the takedowns in his back pocket. So I think he gets the job done here, and I actually really like the price on DraftKings, 8,600. We're not paying a ton here. I think you could target this fight on both sides, but I'm definitely going to be leaning towards the Mike Davis side just because I think the upside is there. This guy's got a ton of volume, multiple takedown upside, and finishing potential as well. So give me Mike Davis at 8,600. I think he's a strong play on DraftKings this week. Next fight up, we have Sexy Mexi. Jon Castaneda comes in as a -190 favorite with the comeback on Danny Santos is +160. And I definitely have some interest in the dog in Daniel Santos here. He made his UFC debut against Julio Arce. Tough debut in that spot, but I did see some things that I liked out of him. It's just that Arce was able to really move and evade a lot of his punches, but the dude showed good cardio, good durability. He was out there swinging all 15 minutes, even though he wasn't landing a ton. I think he showed off a variety of attacks here that I think could have some success against a guy like Castaneda. Castaneda is a guy who I think is a solid underdog to back, but when you start seeing him as a sizable favorite, that's where I have some pause, because he's really one of those guys that is kind of solid everywhere, but not great anywhere. And seeing those type of fighters as a big favorite in certain matchups, it just concerns me a little bit. And you look at the way these two match up, Castaneda has never dealt well with pressure. You look at the Nathaniel Wood fight in his UFC debut, and of course, Wood's a much better striker than Daniel Santos, but he was able to pressure him, have a ton of success. When you pressure this guy, you're able to neutralize a lot of his offense. He doesn't fight well off the back foot, in my opinion. He really just doesn't put out a ton of volume when he's constantly being backed up. And I just don't think he has the footwork or the counter striking that Julio Arce did that was able to give Santos so many problems here. And Santos is going to be pressuring for 15 minutes. You saw the Eddie Wineland fight. Yes, Castaneda knocked out Eddie Wineland in the first round, but up until that point, you can make an argument Wineland was on his way to winning that round. And because of that forward pressure, that's why he was able to have so much success against Castaneda. That's kind of what I expect here with the pressure of Santos. Santos also has a variety of striking attacks that he's going to throw at him with the lead elbow, the spinning attacks as well. He's just going to have Castaneda guessing. And you saw even in the Miles Johns fight, which was a good performance by Castaneda, he ate a lot of clean punches there before Miles Johns gassed out in that fight and sort of wilted away. So I'd expect this fight to play out a lot closer than the odds suggest. Really, the only way I could see Castaneda covering this price tag is if he all of a sudden comes in with a wrestle-heavy game plan and just really dominates Santos on the mat. It's just not something that I really think is going to happen. This guy's only attempted 2 takedowns in the UFC so far, and they weren't even really legitimate takedown attempts either. So I don't expect him to come in here with a wrestle-heavy game plan, and I think the striking is going to be competitive. I'd probably even edge the pressure and the volume to Santos along with the explosive power as well. So give me Santos as the underdog. I'm going to be backing him in some way, shape, or form this weekend. I'm just kind of waiting because there seems to be a lot of Castaneda love out there. He's already up to around -200. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit better price on the Santos side. So give me Santos. Santos by decision is the official pick, and I think he's a solid underdog target as well. Next fight up, Sadiq Yusuf comes in as the biggest favorite on the card, the most expensive fighter on DraftKings as well at 9,500. He's a -900 favorite with UFC newcomer Don Shyness on the comeback at +625. And really, I just expect Yusuf to have this kid covered wherever the fight goes. This guy Shyness has shown, okay wrestling against very low level competition. He lands multiple takedowns, does have explosive power, seems to have some knockout potential as well. But Sadiq Yusuf's a better striker, better all-around fighter, better ground game, I think, as well, which is underrated for Sadiq Yusuf. The only real concern is maybe this guy can catch him with a knee or something. Sadiq has been maybe a little bit chinny over the course of his career, but it's just not something that I really see happening more than like maybe 5% of the time here. So I think Yusuf, yes, he's a massive favorite. I think where I'm going to take my fade on Yusuf is on DraftKings, because at 9,500, that's a big price tag to pay. And on this slate, I think there's just better fighters that are cheaper than him that I want more exposure to. So I'm going to be looking to come in underweight to Sadiq Yusuf. Even though I do think he wins, and I think he probably wins by knockout, I could just see him not really paying off that price tag, even if he scores, 90 to 100 points. Next up in the bantamweight division, Hani Barcelos comes in as a minus 230 favorite with Trevin Jones on the comeback at plus 195. And Barcelos is currently on a 2-fight losing streak. Just a couple years ago, people were saying that this guy could contend for the title in this division, which now in hindsight looks pretty laughable. But you've seen really at this stage in his career, the durability is starting to come into question a little bit. The cardio's fallen off a little bit. The round winning ability, he used to be very convincing in terms of his minute winning potential, and now it's really starting to wither a little bit. And then on the Trevin Jones side, he's on a 2-fight losing streak, but he fought some tough competition. He does have power, does have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he's also one of those guys that doesn't put a ton of volume out there and doesn't really proactively look to grapple. So he's a guy that I really think is more finish reliant, and he's probably live for a finish against Barcelos if he does look as washed as he did his last time out against Victor Henry, who came off a long layoff and basically beat him pillar to post, which is very concerning. So I think Jones, I'm going to have exposure to Jones on DraftKings just because of the price, right? Like, he's so cheap, 7,200. Barcelos, even in a victory, I don't really see him finishing Jones. I could be wrong here, but I think at 9K, he's probably going to need to finish, and I'm just not sure if I can get there. So even though I think he probably wins this at a decent clip, I think it probably comes by decision, and I think I'm going to be looking underweight to him and probably overweight to Jones and hope that Jones could maybe catch a washed version of Barcelos and get him out of there. So Barcelos by decision is the official pick, but in terms of DraftKings, I'm looking at the dog. Next up is Randy Brown, who's a minus 320 favorite. The comeback on Master Nduba, Francisco Trinaldo is plus 265. The ageless wonder just keeps on trucking. He's got a couple wins in a row now coming into this fight at 44 years old. It's truly incredible. Even moving up to the welterweight division, he hasn't really had too many obstacles put in front of him. I think that probably changes here, though, with Randy Brown, who comes in as the second biggest favorite on the card. Brown, I just expect to be the better striker. He's the more natural 170 fighter, and I think he's going to have a striking advantage. This guy is a high-volume dude. He has some solid leg kicks, some decent takedown defense as well, and he's going to be working with a 7-inch reach advantage. So even though I'm never really counting Trinaldo out because he just finds ways to make fights close, like historically he's been very good at limiting the damage and the volume of his opponents coming back the other way. So I could see an argument for him maybe making this fight play out closer than the odds suggest, but I still think it's a fight that he probably loses. So we're going Brown by decision here. In terms of DraftKings, Brown's another guy. He's very expensive. I'm just looking to be underweight to the field. I'm really honing in on the fighters that I like in the expensive price range. The Randy Costa, the Mackenzie Dern in the main event, and then the Mike Davis in the upper mid-range. And really the rest of those people, I'm just trying to be underweight to the field because I do think the upside is probably limited relative to their price. But in this fight, I think it's Brown. I think it's Brown by decision. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our main event. The aforementioned Mackenzie Dern comes in as a minus 225 favorite. The comeback on Yan Xiaonan is plus 190. And I like the Dern side here. I wouldn't bet her at the money line because I think she is mostly finish reliant. Not that she can't win a decision here, but I do think a lot of her win equity comes in that submission. But I do think she ultimately finds that submission here against Yan Xiaonan, who is a high volume striker. I'd expect her to have the striking advantage while the fight plays out on the feet, and she's going to need to try to keep this fight on the feet at all costs because Mackenzie Dern is a dangerous grappler against anybody in the division. But Yan Xiaonan has historically really struggled on the mat. She only defends takedowns at 65%. She was taken down by Angela Hill a couple years back. She was taken down and mollywopped on the mat by Carla Esparza, who obviously has way better wrestling than Mackenzie Dern. But I do think Dern, whether it comes by a takedown or whether she pulls guard, I just think at some point she's able to force the grappling exchanges here where she is going to have a significant edge in this fight. And I do think she's able to threaten until she finds the submission. So Mackenzie Dern by submission is the official pick. But this is the main event, so we're going to see everybody want to jam in one side of the main event here. I actually think this fight could be over-owned just the way they match up. You know, if Mackenzie Dern doesn't find the sub till round 2 or round 3, she's probably not paying off her price, you know. So there's definitely builds where we can get away from the main event. I'm definitely going to have exposure really to both sides. I think Mackenzie Dern wins by sub, but I think playing her at 40+% ownership, you really need that sub to come in round 1. So maybe we just kind of avoid her or be underweight to her relative to the field and just hope she doesn't sub her in one round. We know she's not going to land probably multiple takedowns here. She may only need one if she's able to get one. So I think there's paths to where you can get away from the main event here and still be okay. And as always, guys, I'll have projections on my website, ownership projections, DraftKings player rankings, fantasy points per minute. All of that's on my website, fightnumbers.com. It's completely free. Do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to my channel as I continue to bring you more free content each and every week. I definitely appreciate the support, guys. Best of luck, and we'll see you guys next time.